Good evening, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. I didn't realize there was music tonight. It shows you my ignorance. I just thought it was all poetry. I don't know where I got that idea from. My name is David Armstrong. I'm from Natchez originally. I've been here a little over 17 years. I used to work for the city. I'm also a writer. I've written 4 novels, 2 of which I was able to sell. 4 screenplays, none of which I was able to sell. One of the novels was made into a film. But my friend Matt Dennison, who asked me to read for him, I really consider it an honor, Matt. I'm very grateful, very privileged. Matt is a brilliant poet. I mean, poetry is something I wished I could have written when I was younger. I tried, but I just couldn't express myself like I wanted to. And I've just really been impressed with these poems, and Matt, I hope I can do them justice. The first one's called Dog Medicine. With the hill as steep as the nights were dark, I could usually count on a fair amount of stumbling and cursing before finding a spot that would not quickly send me back to the bottom. And when every night the dog, bigger and blacker than any I had ever seen and looking as if he had borne every blow from every man and every beast on every inch of his solid, dumb face, would come snuffling up from the junkyard that lay at the base of the hill, find me and cover me with the dirt of yet another hole, dug with his steady, giant earnestness, heave a mournful sigh, and settle his massive body across my legs, the better to gaze upon my face. And I would tell myself that dog medicine is better than no medicine, and then I'd look into his eyes. This next poem, which is one of my favorites, is called Sweet Basil. I wonder about my Uncle Basil, Mother's younger brother who died when all the pictures and streets were black and just barely white, and even shoes were rare. He hung around the Strand of movie theater, smoking cigarettes in the dark, damp places. I was told once, and that was all it took. I wonder what he looked like, what his death was like. I see a slung hat, a grin. I cannot imagine the death my mother blamed her mother for. Kept him in dark rooms, she said, no fresh air, no fruit. As if that would appease the one who punishes small town boys for loving the white and flickering faces above and around corners and having fathers who uttered the German grunt in 1941. We were 9. When our friend stayed on the high board until dark, after which for him this story never ends, afraid to dive, unable to jump, I climbed up twice to check on him before going home for the day, finding him increasingly cold and weepy in his dull brown moment as the hours wore on. On my second trip up, I believed he asked me to call his mother, though I pretended not to hear. But this was a rule we all embraced, himself included, before he had begun his climb. If not to dive, once at the top, then at least to jump, but never to walk backwards through the gates of pride. And this one's called One Night. There was a bus driver who had driven the very same route for 14 years and never been able to get through the last 5 lights on the green. Until one night he finally glided, dived, swam through those last 5 like there was nothing to it, nothing at all. And then, after dancing his way down the street, a mysteriously light-hearted tango that started in the laugh of leather against concrete, he floated up to his own front door and into his own wife's arms, whereupon he possessed her for the first time in a very long time. And when it was over, she purring by his side, he smoking his forbidden cigarette in the harsh glow of the night and feeling like a winter. He felt the hot end of his satisfaction meet his flesh and the burn of seeing what his own desire, his own secret battle in life he had actually been, and he shivered with the hairs on his chest suddenly gray. For he knew, and the night was not necessarily unkind, it was just the night, that he would never catch the green on those 5 lights again. So he kissed his wife, and for the first time in 15 years, surprised her for the second time in one night I don't know why I got to laugh, but thank you. Enjoyment. I enjoyed sleeping on the floor near the old gas heater and hearing the rat trap snap and flip under the far kitchen sink. But I did not enjoy waking to the eyeless rat curled in a fat panting ball between my face and the heat, and who scurried away, and though rat touch bumped when I moved. And I did not enjoy losing my keys that night, though the barn cat enjoyed our holding of each other as I circled the house looking through different windows at the same rat, thinking, cat, rat, before he slept in the old farm truck as hillbilly gospel played on the AM radio. But I did enjoy catching the sleepy blind rat the next morning in a brown paper bag and flinging him into the woods behind the house, knowing he would escape into infinite rat blackness, or at least feed a hungry owl or cat, until the bag landed high in a tree and hung there, growing heavier and colder all winter long. And this is one of my favorites called Slaughter. While painting a house in New Orleans some 12,000 years ago, the owner came out and started talking to me. He had me to sit down, take a break, drink some water, offered me a cigarette, all nice and friendly in the easy New Orleans heat. One thing led to another when, just from nowhere, he revealed that his daughter had died in the Jonestown massacre, and he was suddenly weeping, choking, sobbing over his exquisite suit in his exquisite uptown courtyard in front of this nobody kid who was hired to paint his house. I was 21, looking at this adult, lawyer, successful, now broken man reaching out his hands to me from across the table. I didn't know what to say or do, so I took his hands and just listened. I think I was his blank-faced cow from across the fence, able of all to hear him, allow him to moan his wounds, both of us realizing that some degree of idiocy is required to understand slaughter. And this is called Raising the Dead. After the old man found it, the solitary upright marker bearing his mother's name, we worked for several days clearing the small hill of its 100 summers' growth, and then marched with pitchforks side by side, shoving their fingers into the ground, feeling for what had been slowly bowed and buried by the dull weight of time that had lain so heavy upon these obstacles in its path of desired flatness. And when we felt the grip, the pull, we would slice the earth and slide our fingers below, force the cool slabs against the wind once more, restoring the eddies and swirls which formed their borders, and lifted our hairs. We brushed away dirt, reading names and dates to each other, moving hands over faces growing both older and younger, until the entire hill was awakened. And not once did I think of the skulls which stared beneath our feet, but noticed instead how entire families would be laid out in descending scales of grief. All voices stopped within the same small circle of days, and how one family, from suckling child to still young father, had been taken by scrofula in the winter of 1868. The dark, earthy sound of which I tried again and again in the thick summer air, imagining horses in snow, their hot, labored breath warming hands in stubble fields, and thought it beautiful. Scrofula. I chanted as I slid the tines in. Scrofula is what I am searching for. It begins as an unspoken sound of blackness circling high overhead, looking for someone able to hear its message of release, to blacken their lips with the passing of its taste, alone, and then in staggered harmony with those nearby. It begins as a whisper in a child's ear, growing louder and louder until no prayer for health or moan or love can penetrate the rush of night. So loud his very eyes become the lips which form the name, and all he can see in the small hill behind the barn. So it is there that he flies to lie in untouched silence, waiting for the others and those who would come much later, seeking soft marble. For 2 more days, we built a fence around that hill, digging the holes by hand and tying the posts together in a complicated, old-fashioned way whose secret of doing I knew would vanish with the old man when he heard his own irresistible sound, the high whispered calling of his name in the ultimate foreign tongue. And this one is called Sunflower, another of my favorites. When I was 19, lost, alone, depraved, and often raving from the lack of food and meaning, walking the streets for days on end after dropping out of college, the better to sink, an old man stepped up to me and said, "Don't look so down. Hold your head up. Be proud you're a human being." His words, the key to the lock I could not open by myself, and I immediately went to my secret place, a circular depression of rocks hidden by trees, wept until empty, and emerged later somewhat cured. Today at the Sunflower Grocery after work, dirty, tired, looking for the shortest checkout line, I noticed one checker 4 lanes over with no customers, though all the other lanes were full. But what attracted me more than the empty lane, more than curiosity as to why no one would use, was the pure sadness radiating from 50 feet away. I went down and said, "You look so unhappy," as I emptied my cart, hoping to make a joke of what I assumed was no more than boredom or disgust at her crappy job, some engagement of the common exchange I've come to depend upon as a substitute for humanity. But she did not smile, and I noticed she was very young, very pale, very pregnant, visibly exhausted, possibly in pain, possibly ultimately alone at the end of the day. As I paid and gathered my bags, feeling guilty, for she was about to cry, I said, "Take care now." But I didn't tell her to hold her head up. Didn't say, "Be proud you're a human being." Didn't even say, "Hang on, kid, you'll make it." I wasn't brave enough to touch her where she needed to be touched. Perhaps I knew to do so would destroy her in the moment, as she had no easy access to her crying place. No one is a stranger to pain, and some pain appreciates the lancing, but other pain at other times is too big to be touched at all. And maybe my favorite that Matt Dennison's written, and this is the last one, it's called Quadrant. I've got this hanging on my refrigerator. Wherever you are, in whatever room, of whatever house, of whatever's left, of whatever life you may possess, imagine that room, that house, that life in the middle of a ship, in the middle of an ocean, in the middle of a night, headed finally there. Thank y'all. Thank you, man.